Hi, my name is Peter McReynolds and I'm a watercolorist. We're making this video today so that I can introduce my new book called Watercolor Sketching for Travelers. Watercolor Sketching for Travelers is an e-book, meaning that it's an electronic book, it's not a paper book. That means that it will appear on a pad like this, one of these tablets. And because it does appear on a tablet electronically that you download from something like iTunes, it means that we can offer you, for just a few dollars, a book that would cost $50 or $75 if it was in a regular bookstore and it was printed on paper. Because printing high-quality colored reproductions is very, very expensive, and it's very easy to do on something like a computer screen. And so we think it's quite a bargain. Returning to the book, Watercolor Sketching for Travelers, what's that mean? What was I trying to do in writing this book? Well, it's about watercolors. And this means that experienced watercolorists might be interested in it, but don't be intimidated if you just want to begin with watercolors. It's also suitable for the brand new beginner who wants to learn a new hobby, or a new hobby for doing your scrapbooking or something. So it's not going to involve doing paintings that take days to do and all kinds of arcane, difficult techniques. It's just straightforward and easy. It's just sketching. So watercolor sketching, both of those words are very important, very meaningful. And the last, for travelers, is equally important. The issue or problem, or the fun we addressed in writing a book called Watercolor Sketching for Travelers, is precisely that, to make something that's very easy to carry, very small. It won't involve carrying easels and bags and boxes full of painting material. It's very lightweight, suitable for, say, backpacking, just something that you can carry in your purse or in your pockets while you're traveling. And the upshot of that means that the results you'll get will be small. Here's a typical one. This is a little, you think of it as a screen, little miniature screen that I painted right up here behind my house in the mountains. It's done on a piece of watercolor paper that's longer than it is wide, and then I scored it on the back and folded it 4 times so it stands. We keep that in a bookcase. And so on your travels you can make these kinds of watercolor sketches. Another typical example is, this is on a relatively small pad of watercolor paper, and here I painted a windmill like you'd find in Holland. And this is in acrylic frame. And one of the major things that we'll cover in the book, besides how to make your watercolor sketches, what you need to make your watercolor sketches, there's even chapters on storing and displaying and framing the results of your watercolor sketching outfits. This is in a thin acrylic frame that you can get at a photo framing store. It's quite easy and looks very nice. You just stand that on your desk at work, or on your bureau at home, or in your living room. So you can see that in this book, Watercolor Sketching for Travelers, we cover all the things that you'll need to know from soup to nuts. Continuing on what you'll get, here's kind of a large one. This is about as large as you do, and this is one that I've done of the Golden Gate Bridge, which is not far from where I live. And this is the kind of thing that you can do around your own hometown. Now, to make a watercolor sketch that size, I used a pad or a block of watercolor paper that's this size. It's a little big to put in a man's pocket, but it's not too big to go in a tote or a small backpack. So it's, again, quite suitable for watercolor sketching for travelers. As I started to mention a minute ago, the book has major sections. One of the sections, of course, covers why you would want to do this. I think you want to do it because it's just a whole lot of darn fun. It's fun to do. You can meet other people where you live that are organized into clubs and groups to do this kind of thing. or even while you're traveling, even overseas. My wife and I have been not accosted, we've been met by people in their countries who come up, they're curious to see what you're doing. And they're very nice, it's not a problem. If they see that you're busy, they'll leave you alone, but if you look open to the idea, people are always curious as to what you're doing. You'll be the artist, and you can make friends abroad. They'll tell you where the best food, where the best restaurants are, where the least expensive restaurants are. You'll just have a whole lot more fun traveling if you add sketching to your itinerary. So, another thing that I wanted to get into before I forget something is there's like several chapters in the book on what you're going to need to do watercolor sketching for travelers. What are the good things to get? What are good enough, and where you get them for not too much money, and you don't want to get something that's more than you need, too expensive, would be a problem if you lost it. So there's a whole chapter on paint boxes. Obviously, if you're going to do watercolor sketching for travelers, you're going to need a paint box. And I have one here that's very inexpensive that you can get. It's got these 8 lovely colors inside. And so obviously you're going to need paint. This is a plastic box of watercolor paints. You can fit right into your pocket, or it's no bigger than a computer mouse. So you have your paint. Now you're going to need to apply the paint with something, so I tell you what kind of brushes to get and where best to get them. Look at this. It's just about the same size and shape as a fountain pen. It opens up like this, and the brush part is hidden inside the protective handle. Isn't that neat? No bigger than a fountain pen, and I always carry 2 of these. A rather larger one like that, and then this smaller one. Typically these paint boxes come with their own brush, but typically it's way too small unless you're painting ants or bees or some kinds of small bugs or something. So we have the paint box, we have the brushes, and then as I just showed you a minute ago, you're going to need to paint on something. And those are the 3 things. And you have a chapter on selecting paint boxes, a chapter on what makes a good brush and how to select it, how to find it, where to get it for not too much money. There's similarly also a chapter about what kind of paper to get to paint on. Isn't this neat? Again, it's no bigger than a man's wallet, and it's got 15 postcards in there, blank watercolor paper postcards, and it's hard to see in the camera, but on one side it's already printed to be mailed anywhere in the world. So one of the things I like to do myself when I'm traveling is to do a little watercolor sketch wherever I happen to be, or 1 or 2 of them, and then I post them home, and they're waiting for me when I get home. Actually, you might worry about mailing them home. For me, sometimes it's taken as long as 2 months for them to straggle home, but I have to honestly tell you, every postcard I've mailed from anywhere in the world on my travels has always managed sooner or later to make it to my house. So that makes that's an extra nice thing about your memories if they have, you know, the postmark and the stamps and so on. Okay. Oh, so we've talked about what you need to do watercolor sketching for travelers. There's a whole long chapter on techniques. Now, the techniques of watercolor sketching typically are those of watercolor painting, but they're easier. It's a subset. It's not all of the things that are used in watercolor painting, because when you're sketching as a traveler, you don't have time to do any complicated, involved kind of thing. You want to do it very quickly, a la prima, the first strike. And so it's much easier, in my opinion, than watercolor painting, because you can't spend a lot of time doing it. So we cover a dozen or more different techniques, little tricks that will help you do your watercolor sketching. From just dropping, if you're sitting in a cafe and there's some sugar or salt, you can actually drop some grains of salt onto your wet watercolor painting to make a texture. There's just, you know, probably a couple dozen different techniques that are covered in that section. Also, as I mentioned before, there's a section on what to do with these watercolor sketches when you're finished with them. One thing you can do is, here's what I did. My wife and I traveled to Eastern Europe, and I found this old-fashioned photo album. And so here's all these postcards, some of which I made there and mailed home, some of which I brought home. Look at all those things. Isn't this a lovely album to share with your friends, to, you know, share with them the fun you have on your trip? Here's my wife standing in the capital of Slovenia. Here she is in a neighborhood of Slovenia. So, I think I pretty much covered everything. For a few dollars, a great bargain, you get a really good book on doing something, kind of a special subsection of watercolor painting. The easier, fun part, watercolor sketching for travelers. And I've certainly enjoyed it, and I hope you will too, and I want to share with you how to learn how to do this enjoyable hobby, whether you're just going to make memories, do things around the house, share with others in a hobby group, do it for scrapbooking. I even have some that go on my tablet, and I can email these to friends and to family. And I think that's about it, except for getting started and beginning the fun. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you enjoy the book. Thank you.